conversation between us. There's so much richness that's been said. Maybe we'll just maybe share some responses. I just love Rose and what she's doing with the U.S. Latino Forum, and here we go. I want to say kudos because you guys are transforming the field, and it's so fantastic, and you're just inspiring all of us. So that's my 2 cents. And to Miriam, you killed it.
You can do all that later over a drink. What I wanted to, I was looking no. I was looking at the list. I know quite a number of the people on the list. In fact, one of them is a member of the Afro-Latino Forum. Is this thing on? Yeah. One of them is a member of the Afro-Latino Forum. It's Shima Thomas. And this is something that we've dealt with within the forum a lot. How we can integrate into the Latino world. And one of the things that I was really impressed with what you said, because it's also been my experience, is the dependence on and receptivity of African Americans, both in terms of individuals and programs to get our own work done. When my husband and I started the Afro-Latino Forum almost 12 years ago now, we would go around and speak wherever anybody would invite us to. And I'd say 8 out of the 10 invitations came from African American and Caribbean organizations. There was not that kind of a reception for us within the Latino groups. In fact, we were considered troublemakers, divisive, that's not an issue. Mentioning Afro-Latinidad was problematic at so many levels. And yet, we had this other space among African Americans. And I want to throw out the question that both for you two and for the audience in general about how we break with that. One other anecdote. I worked at the Schomburg Center for many years. The Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. In fact, I was one of their curators for social historical, not that many art exhibits. And one of the dynamics that I experienced there is that most people assumed that I was African American until I told them my name. When I introduced and Miriam Jiménez Roman. Oh, you marry somebody Spanish? And I said, no. So that's also part of that dynamic that you're located in these different spaces. But to this day, the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture will have a panel discussion on blacks and Latinos, and that's how it's phrased, blacks and Latinos, and they will look for a light-skinned Latino to be on the panel, somebody that people can identify as Latino. They never invite black folk. Black Latinos do not get invited to speak about being Latino. And so I'm throwing this out there. I like to do that. The whole notion of white privilege within the Latino community that nobody wants to talk about, the racism that exists within our own community, and how we have to look for other spaces to be able to express it, to be able to be, como la compañera aquí, la cubana, to be who you are, just grumpy in the morning, not necessarily.
Yeah.
You have to wake up trying to pinpoint your identity. So those are my comments, and I'm really open to listening to others.
I think that the issue that we all grapple with is the realization of how to account for both, right? White supremacy and anti-Latino racism, because white supremacy and colorism and racism affects Latinidad and Latino identity for sure. So when we have to, that's why I said we have to embrace Latinx identity, but with all the contradictions, and we can't shun out on this idea of a commodifiable, clean-cut, sanitized Latino identity that would be more palatable, right? We have to go there, and we have to talk about, the hybridity and Afro-Latinidad, indigenous language. We have to really get there, but we need to get there. To me, Latinx identity is a space from which to explore those contradictions and to explore those differences. However, and also be very aware of how it is used sometimes to whiten Latinos, right? My work has always been about against particularly the more marketable definition of Hispanidad in Latinidad, the clean-cut, Latin look that you will see on television, which is not at all, right, what you see here represented on the table. So it's that kind of contradiction that I think younger generations, are really bridging so well, and I think your work and trajectory, working with African American curators and engaging with, Africa diasporic traditions, because when you do with Puerto Rican and Caribbean artwork, you also have to, look at the Caribbean and African diaspora art and aesthetics, which has been looked at oftentimes more than there's more on that work in Caribbean art and oftentimes Latinx art. So I think that that's where I see the hope and the excitement, is going for those contradictions, and that's why I say Latinx art. When I say Latinx art, I'm not. It's not the Univision definition, of Latino that I'm embracing.
Yeah, I mean, I think for my generation, the millennial generation, I have a lot of hope for us, and I think we are going to address those contradictions and the ways that our history is taught as these separate categories. I mean, if you've seen me talk before, I've mentioned to one effect or another that Latinos do not live in a bubble, and we don't live in like these separate bubbles from each other either. Afro-Latinos and white Latinos, I mean, our histories are one. And I think it was very significant that the Chicano Studies professor that I mentioned, Dr. Alejandro Gravilla, that he was teaching us Afro-Mexican history. I mean, I think that is so rare in Chicano studies. And it shouldn't be, because many Chicanos have, our heritage and our ancestry is informed by and marked by African slave history and by blacks. I mean, there's like current populations who are Afro-Mexican. And so, I mean, for me in my practice, I study both, African diaspora in Latin America, black art and Latino art. And I know many of my colleagues too, they're cognizant of these different histories. And I think that's why we're so valuable as scholars.
And I want to say also that applies to Latino studies at large. I don't think anybody who does Latino studies today does it in isolation from reading African American history and African and ethnic studies at large, right? Critical race studies as a discipline, so that we're reading African American scholars, and we, I myself could not have written about, Puerto Rican middle classes without having read about, black middle classes in Harlem. We feed from that work because African American studies and African American literature has a longer history. So you can't just say, oh, we're Latino studies in isolation from. No, we're part of an ethnic studies movement that also feeds from Asian American history, critical race studies. So it's kind of complex and exciting space from which to then carve particularities.
What you're saying now about the newness of this is really important because historically, Latino studies, Latina studies was done within LASA. It's only in the last couple of years that
LASA is Latin American Studies Association.
Yeah, so we were kind of like the stepchild of the more important Latin American studies, the more accredited. It's only in the last 3 years that there's become a movement toward Latino studies. And so I think
and there's now an association of Latino Studies Association that broke away because they didn't find a space in Latin America. They didn't want to be ghettoized in Latin American studies. And they have now a Latino Studies Association, which is very exciting.
But yeah, it speaks to the newness of it, that even though you had Latino studies or ethnic studies in various universities, you didn't have a concept. You still really weren't in a place where you felt that Latinos were legitimate subjects of study in their own right, without connecting it to a transnational or a history from Latin America. That we're good enough. We don't need them.
But then also, like I mentioned, because of that, like in between that Latinos are, like for us, for at least for my generation, like we're benefiting from that, in that we're versed in all these different histories, and that's a plus. That's a positive.
But I think that part of the issue with a lot of these marginal communities, when we do studies, we have to be interdisciplinary. We have to go out there. When you're creating, you take all the resources at your that are available to you because there's nothing else. And that's the exciting part about being creative, that you don't necessarily have to do it the way others have done it. You feed from them, but you have that space to be creative about how you do it. And it's the exciting thing for us in terms of the forum, that that we're looking at the possibilities that now that there are Black advocacy groups really very active throughout Latin America and the Caribbean, that will feed our conversations here about race and ethnicity, colorism, the pigmentocracy, all of the inequities that we know are present both back there
Right.
and here, that we will feed off of each other and in a creative and very critical way rather than just accept.
And I want to also speak that, if you go to a Latino Studies conference, one of the things that you will see is how because, we tend to think of Latin American and Latino studies, if you do Latino studies, you have to be hemispherically informed. You have to know about immigration, and you have to know about Latin American history. And of course, you also need to know about US race and ethnic studies, right? So what's exciting about Latino studies is that nowadays, especially newer generations, are not debating that question as to whether it's only US and you have to cut the pie here and not look at Latin American immigration, or likewise, you're looking at Latin American studies and you can touch on US Latinos. It's like, no, people are engaging in these conversations that are like hemispheric, global, transnational, but also very informed in US ethnic studies. And that's what's most exciting about that conversation as it's taking place today. We have 1 minute. I want to just shout out. It just happens today that there's an affordable Latino art sale. Just wanted to say it because, it just happened. This is organized by artists. And then I said, wait, this is the fourth Latinos. I'm like, my God, they didn't know this is happening. And this is the first time that Latino artists are having a Latino art sale, trying to create a market, like a festival, like a fair, because there's all of these Latin American art fairs, but there's no such thing as a Latino art fair. So this is starting tonight. They want to talk about doing it every year. It's very exciting, so just stop by. It's actually, I'll leave that stuff here. So.
Does anybody have anything to say out there? I mean, the conversation should be.
There's a question. First, I want to congratulate Rose for the work that you are doing. It's the first time I've seen and felt real hope for the next turn of the wheel. And the other, it's an extension.
Use this one.
Miriam and Arlene are extraordinary academics. And my question is, in a way, to both of you. If you have any theories about, in that list that you showed, I was blown away by what's happening basically in California. What is your theory about why such a dearth of Latinos in art history in a city that's 1/3 Latino? Do you have any?
I think
Chicano studies has always been, and Chicano Mexican American studies and ethnic studies has always been stronger on the West Coast. So I think it's a kind of, indication of that too, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's completely it. And the history of Chicano studies, it has a long history since the civil rights movement and the Chicano art.
But what are they doing so right on the West Coast, and how can we catch up?
And the other great thing is, is that Chicano art, as we know, within the Latino category, Chicano art has had a more of a recognition. And partly, Chon Noriega, who's here, and the Chicano Art Center, and the Ever Project, and there's been institutional, right, into feeding and studying Chicano art as a category too, that also fits that. And they're collectors, more collectors too of Chicano art.
But there's also issues because, if you notice, there are a lot of Ph.D. students in California who are Latino art specialists, but only 3 of them are in art history programs. The rest are in ethnic studies programs. And so it's not like there's, this utopia going on the West Coast. There isn't. There's still a lot of
I think that Susana's doing more, relatively speaking, no? And that's one of the reasons I mentioned the whole 1965 and the Immigration Act that allowed access, because Chicanos, Mexican Americans, Tejanos, Hispanos, well, depending on where you are, right, really dominated the Latin American Hispanic population. And they didn't just dominate in terms of numbers, there was also money among Chicanos that did not exist among the Puerto Ricans, and certainly Dominicans. They didn't even start coming into the 60s in large numbers. So you have to have collectors. It is a business. It has a market. And all these things feed in one into the other.
And I would argue, Susana, that New York City has been taken over by Latin American art elites.
Absolutely.
And that's really another issue. There's all these hands. Since they say please wrap, what we're going to do perhaps is get 3 questions and just hear them and maybe not respond to later. Judy.
I wanted to respond to why you're seeing 5 PhD candidates in UCLA. Those are my students.
Yay! Judy Baca.
It's actually a moment of opportunity, and it is not institutionalized properly. So we have to know that we haven't gotten there yet. But what we have is Chicano Studies with an expressive track in the PhD program. And the expressive track is really an exciting possibility. But it is a stepchild to Chicano Studies. Because Chicano Studies hasn't yet embraced entirely the importance of the arts within its larger study. Did people hear me? Yes. Only to say that we have a ways to go because it's not institutionalized. We're looking at a group of students in the expressive track in Chicano Studies in the PhD program. And these are kids who have identified themselves as wanting to be in the arts. They have not found the art history department an amicable place to be. So therefore, they gravitated toward Chicano Studies. But the Chicano Studies department also has difficulty integrating the arts as a critical part of their program.
Correct. Amalia?
I find it sort of ironic that we're discussing Chicano art from the historical side in terms of scholarship and, you know, the work that Judy's doing in the expressive track, because if we go the other direction and look at the presence of Chicano art in the larger mainstream and marketplace, no, it's not there. There are small pockets of it. But as you know, Latin American art is much bigger. Even Latino art as a rubric in terms of the artists passing through, who are getting galleries, who are in major museum shows, are much higher visibility than Chicano. And I've always maintained that one of the struggles for Chicano artists is, one, the absence in the mainstream curatorial and criticism fields of the aesthetic undergirdings of the work itself. What do they talk about? What are those works about? What do they stand for? And also that there is a long trail of activism attached to Chicano artists. Look at who we are. And even in the newer generation, there is still that activism, and activism is not a generally positive characteristic in the art world. It is a marketplace. And you don't want people asking you questions about the composition of your museum board or your acquisitions committee or any other form of policy and activism. So I think that we have to be sure that we understand that while this scholarship is so valuable and someday will give that aesthetic base to understanding and criticism, I'm not sure the reception is anywhere near that in the art world. And you know, we say that as people who've been there for a very long time and hoping that more and more will be possible.
Absolutely.
Only have to look, I'll end with this, look at the Los Angeles Latin America Getty Project. Look at how there is an absence of any Chicano cultural institutions funded in those millions and millions of dollars. Look at the solo shows of Chicano artists. Out of all of those, you'll see, I think, 4, 3, 2 are dead, 1 is alive. So there is still much, much work to be done.
Okay. Chon and Adriana?
Okay, wait. We're gonna
we
like
don't have any
Chon,
more
and
time.
then let's cut it off after
Sorry.
that. Okay. Okay.
I want to echo what Rose said, that it's amazing, you know, you see 6 graduate students doing their PhDs at UCLA, not a single one of them is going through art history. And I've been at UCLA 25 years, and I've certainly helped a number of mostly Latina students have gone through the art history program make a graceful exit because of the environment there. And this is actually a very diverse department. So it's not an issue of diversity per se, it's about the understanding of what the discipline is. And what Judy said is absolutely right. She has created a space in which we really see there is an interest. But what I would do is I would actually kick it back to the other coast and say that my role model has always been all the Latinas and Latino-friendly scholars who got their PhDs in New York. And it's people like Yasmin Ramirez, Carmen Ramos, Taina Caragol, and Rocio Aranda, and others, and Deb Cullen, that were really there with the PhDs, and that they had a long struggle, but they got into the institutions where they've now been able to make a difference. And then we've added Josh Franco, who's that's the first Chicano name there, who's now at the Smithsonian. So I think we have to see kind of where the institutional opportunities are. And on the East Coast, a lot of that was working with people like Edward Sullivan, who are in Latin American art. So there's an issue about art history, and what I would frame as a kind of broader question, and I think there's a lot to say about what the Getty's doing and the kind of complexity of that within that very specific environment of greater Los Angeles. But I would say that, over the last 60 years, the discussion in art history about contemporary art and American art have largely been the same. This is the point in time in which the US really makes a claim to the center of that story. And everyone telling that story is telling a very exciting story about art. And it's a very complicated story. There's a lot of arguments that go back and forth across it. We are not in that story. And what Arlene has pointed out and what we've seen this morning, there are a number of scholars and emerging scholars like Rose and Josh who know the story of Latino or Chicano, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Cuban American, and they know that story in a broad hemispheric and sometimes global context. Those two stories are not in dialogue. And
Sean,
what I
I'm
would
sorry,
say,
I'm going to cut you off because they told us
Yeah.
to wrap up.
No,
And
but
I want to give the last word to
yeah.
Rose as we finish.
we do have to
the
pursue
panel.
that, and I think we have to find ways
Thank
of
you.
forcing the issue in this meeting here to have that dialogue. It's not just about looking at the Latino as a separate thing and relative to Latin America. Where is that story in contemporary art, which is also largely dominated by American art, and that's where we are.
Correct. Thank you. Rose, do you want to end with that? How do we, how are you doing that transformation of changing the conversation of American art?
I think that's too much to address in like the few seconds that we have left here. But I look forward to talking to you more off of the stage.
Thank you.